Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Brady Kramer started skating at 4 years old and ended up being one of the most sought-out hockey prospects in the world. He was taken in the 7th round of the NHL Draft by the Montreal Canadians, but his pro career didn't last very long. His battles with addiction and anxiety did, though. Then a failed suicide attempt in 2011 was followed by the courage to change and what's now more than 10 years of sobriety. Brady is a living, breathing example of how recovery can work if you're willing to change and put in the work yourself. Lace up your skates. But first, Kevin Souza.
Stand by the ocean floor.
Hello.
Brady.
Pete, how are you?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm now working at Upland Country Day School and down in Kennett Square, and I've got about a 40-minute commute each day back to Berwyn. So I'm actually just getting off the Payoff exit.
Okay, well let's get into your story. I want to start off. You mentioned you graduated. Now you and I are both from the Philly area. You graduated Haverford School in 1991. That's a big date for you. I think you were drafted into the NHL in what, 1990?
You know, Pete, I was, and it's funny that this goes this way. So in 1991, I was actually drafted.
Okay.
So I was drafted out of high school.
So it's like pro baseball almost.
Yes. So they keep your rights, and you don't have to, you don't have to sign right away, and they don't really expect you to sign right away unless you're like a 1 or 2 rounder. I was a 7th rounder, so I was a project. But it's funny, as things would have it, I was at rehab with my brother, visiting my brother in rehab. I wasn't personally in rehab, but he was the day I got drafted, and I didn't even know it. Like, so I didn't know I got drafted. I had just gone up to visit him, and when we got back, I went out to eat. I actually went to the old Alligators, if you remember that.
Absolutely.
And, and I called home, and back then, there wasn't the internet or this and that. And my parents had called the Inquirer, and they said, yep, you got drafted 7th round by Montreal. And I was ecstatic, but, I wasn't even around to hear it because, as, a little foreshadowing, I was out visiting a sibling in rehab.
Is it obviously? I mean, I'm going to ask a question I think you just answered. It's in your family?
Well, and that's the funny thing. And Pete, I'm pretty much an open book on this because, this disease, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. So I will tell you this, my brother is actually adopted. So he is not, a gene. But at the same point, my sister has struggled with addiction. I have, but then, it's a funny foe. Like I have, my father and my mother and my other sister, they don't struggle at all with it. So, probably back a ways, there's some more addiction issues. So I'm sure there is. But, for me, this kind of blindsided me, as I'll, kind of go on to tell you a little bit more.
Jump forward with me. What is your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is August 30th, 2011.
And now we're going to get in the time machine again. What was your first memory of getting that substance in your body?
Well, it's funny because I'm the youngest of 6 children, Pete. And I would watch my brothers and sisters go out and do their thing. And, as the youngest, I think you always want to create your own trail, your own mark. And I wanted to do nothing of what they did. So I frowned upon drinking like it was the scarlet letter. I mean, I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I remember, and I don't know where you grew up, Pete, but like I grew up on the main line, and for those of your listeners that don't know main line or Delco, I got hanging around with some Delaware County folks, and they introduced me to my first keg party.
The blue collar guys.
Absolutely, and you know what? That's where, you know, again, I lived two worlds, Pete. I lived the mainline world where I went to the Haverford School, and then I lived the Delaware County world where I skated and played hockey and had all my friends from the stadium.
I was going to ask you that. The main line, for folks who don't know, it's a kind of an elitish, upper crusty type deal, and then there's a blue collar aspect of Delaware County where that's where you can find some toughness. And I wondered how you got started playing hockey. I'm guessing you started skating long before you took your first drink.
I did. I actually started skating when I was 4, and I skated because my brother skated. My brother got involved in hockey because, you know, my parents were big fans of the Broad Street Bullies, 73 and 74 Stanley Cup.
Philadelphia
you know,
Flyers.
And, yes, sir. And, you know, I just kind of followed suit. But, you know, as you mentioned, you know, my mom is from Chester, which, if, you know, for some of your listeners don't know, it's kind of a, you know, gritty area. My dad's from the city of Philadelphia, but I was raised in, you know, the suburban, you know, country club area of the main line. But yet all my friends were Delaware County friends, where there's the more blue-collar, rugged, tough people, proud. It's like Texas, you know. People who are from Delaware County are proud to be from Delaware County.
Absolutely.
You know, so I never felt like I fit in, Pete. Like I felt like, you know, here I am at school driving the Chevy Nova, and all my buddies are driving Porsches, while, you know, in Delaware County, I'm the rich kid who, you know, whose dad, you know, is an executive and wears a suit to work. So, you know, the long and short of it is, my first drink, my first experience with drinking was buying a red Solo cup at a keg party with a bunch of my Haverford High friends, Delaware County friends, and I didn't even use it. I just held on to it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And, you know, eventually, through osmosis, I tried that first drink, and then I was off to the races.
What did alcohol do for you?
Gosh, you know, it is funny because I did have a chance to listen to some of your other podcasts, and I was discussing it with my wife, and, you know, I think as an athlete, we're adrenaline junkies, Pete. And, you know, with that, you're constantly looking for that next exciting experience, whether it be the adulation of the crowd or, you know, people asking you for your autograph, and whatever it is. And alcohol took the pressure off. My mind didn't have to race. I didn't have to worry what anyone else thought about me. I didn't have to compete against anyone. I just could go into that numb zone, as most alcoholics know, that just, you know, the ease and comfort of the first drink, that, as the big book talks about.
Being such a great athlete, was there a lot of pressure on you from the outside, or was there pressure that you put on yourself through the alcoholism?
Looking back on it, and this is where, you know, rein me in whenever you want to, Pete, but like, I'm the youngest, like I said, of 6 children. 2 of my parents' children died at a young age of 2 and 3. And that was, you know, they were the oldest. And I really do believe going forward in life, I felt like I was maybe that replacement. You know, I was supposed to be this perfect child. You know, my mom always told me, like, I was the one that could say the right thing to make her feel good when she was going through a depression, which I had. And then, you know, you mix that with the Haverford School, which, you know, elite prep school, big time athletics, big time academics. And then, you know, you shine in sports, and all of a sudden you realize, like, and again, for me, it's 2 male-dominated areas. I'm at an all-boys school from kindergarten, age 5 to age 17, and then I'm in a boys' locker room, and then I'm youngest of 6, where I'm fighting for everything I can get, and there was just no room for error.
And mom's
No
calling
room
you
for error.
mom's calling you the golden child. That's a kind of a pressure cooker.
100%. Yet, I do look back on it, and I quit hockey twice before my career ended to play tennis, which actually some would argue I was better at. I actually, because but tennis didn't have that masculine edge to it, so I never thought it was tough enough for me to play. So I always found my way back to hockey. But yeah, my parents actually, they didn't put the pressure on me to succeed. They weren't, as an athletic director and someone that works in education, I know helicopter parents. I know parents that, I was laughing today, if I've had 200 parents in my office, 199 of them start off with, I'm not the type of parent that's going to come in and talk to the coach. And it's like, you just became that guy. So I didn't feel, Pete, like I had that kind of pressure. But looking back on it, I know that, like, my dad doesn't introduce me as Brady Kramer, the guy with 10 years of sobriety. He introduces me as Brady Kramer, the ex-pro hockey player. And, I'm 47 now. Like, I'm prouder of my 10 years of sobriety than anything I ever did athletically.
Yeah, it really is, and that's kind of the comfort in your own skin. At least for me, that's kind of what's come of that. I was talking to a buddy about it today. All of a sudden, things start to change in your life, and I mean, the gifts of sobriety start coming in, and there really is such a pride, such a quiet confidence that I've found, like you said, through the program and through AA and through sobriety. It's pretty unbelievable. I get everything that I got out of alcohol and drugs out of recovery, and I never thought, and I'm proud of that. That's a self-esteem builder.
Absolutely. Well, and Pete, like, I tell, and it's like, it's for me, again, for any of your listeners that don't know the program, it's God, it's a higher power, whatever you choose it to be. But for me, like, the message is so crystal clear that, like, Brady, you had to go through this in order to receive the gifts that I'm giving you now. And when I talk to these young kids about alcohol and alcoholism and my personal story, Pete, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, they are listening to every word. And that gift is my Game 7 winning goal. Like, I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, I have some regrets that I didn't get to play in an NHL game, and I didn't have the fame and fortune that I thought I was entitled to. But what I've received from Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery in general is a gift that I don't deserve, but am trying to make the most of every day.
Let's go back and talk about how you got here. In high school, you're excelling on the ice. You're starting to drink. When does the drinking really pick up?
So I'll preface it by saying I didn't realize I was an alcoholic until about a year and a half into Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I knew I was a heavy drinker. I knew alcohol did not help my cause. But at the end of the day, I've suffered from anxiety and depression since I was in 5th grade. And, as we know, Pete, like, alcohol is the solution. It's not the problem. I didn't realize that. So, in high school, I start drinking, but you know what? I'm so concerned with this perfectionism, this never failing, this never letting anyone beat you, that, I pick my spots very carefully of when I drink alcohol. So, where a lot of my friends are at keg parties on Friday nights and Saturday nights, I'm with mom up in, Western Ontario somewhere, staying at a Motel 8, because I have 5 hockey games on the weekend.
Yeah.
So, so high school, I had my spots, but they were very, they were few and far between because of the commitment to hockey.
And the commitment to hockey, go ahead.
Well, that being said, Pete, like, looking back on it, I can never, ever remembering drinking just to have a drink. I never remember it. I always drank to get drunk, and towards the end, actually, I mean, and a lot of the times blackout drunk.
I viewed it as a solution too. I viewed it as a gift. My first spiritual experience was really the first time I can remember getting drunk and being able to do things that I was scared to do before. I went to church as a kid, and I had belief, but man, that first time I really got drunk, like in high school, I was so excited just to go and do things drunk. And I was like, wow, it was like getting a new video game.
Well, and you know what, for me it was, and I'll be the first to admit it, like, we don't talk about it much, but our big book mentions it, and that's the whole, S word, the girls, the sex. Like, I was terrified of women. I was terrified of girls. Like, I went to an all-boys school. I was shy. I was sensitive. I was vulnerable. And alcohol took that away. And it allowed me to actually go up to a girl and say hello. Now, the problem was, by the end, I didn't remember saying hello, and so, it defeated the purpose, but, it really took the shyness away from me and, gave me a sense of confidence and excitement, in this rush. But, and I've heard this before from another guy in the program, Pete, I was always looking for that just right feeling, like maybe a little bit more will make me feel just right. And maybe just a little more, maybe one more beer. And I never found that sweet spot. And I always, unless, you're in that spot where you're really trying to monitor it, I always ended up, in a blackout or doing something that I regretted.
And the sweet spot, if you can find it, lasts about a minute or two. And I was chasing it for the rest of my life.
Oh God, yeah.
It's that euphoric. I'd have that euphoric recall where you just think back to the way you felt, and you're constantly like, "Let me get back here." And that's the thing people struggle with when they get sober is, if you get sober and you're not working a program or you're having a rough day, you can have that euphoric recall, and it's like, man, and then thinking about getting drunk sounds and looks good, and it's you mentioned the thing with the girls too. Alcohol and drugs was the biggest lie that was ever told to me, because it told me that I needed it to be good at X, Y, or Z. Did you ever take anything performance enhancing to play hockey?
I did not, and it's interesting because, I always say, like, I took a steroid when I was in 5th grade, and it was actually prednisone in order to help me with a bad case of poison ivy. And I had such a bad reaction to it it's actually what triggered my depression in 5th grade. And so, any kind of chemical really into my body was a no-no. Like, my mom wouldn't even let me take anti-inflammatories. I mean, I just was like, that's why this whole thing for me was so bizarre. Again, my brother was, and I say this, if my brother would be listening to this, because he's in recovery as well, my brother truly saved my life. And that's another part of my story, which, I will let you know about. But, I just, cocaine, I remember Lenny Bias, if you remember him, Pete.
Sure.
Like, I literally thought, you did cocaine, you died.
Yeah.
Like, unless you were some, superhero, if you tried cocaine, you would die the next day. And so, none of that stuff was my story. It was really just alcohol. And, high school, it started to bubble. And then in college, Pete, like, again, so focused on hockey and no other, like, that was my career. It was like, people go to school to be a doctor. People go to school to be engineers or what have you. I went to college to get better at hockey and to eventually turn pro and move on. So, when it comes to the drinking, we practiced or worked out 6 days a week, all school year. And on day 7, the night of day 6, I got blasted. And it was, it was a just hamster wheel of 6 days of training as hard as you can. Day 7 is, nursing a hangover, because on 6, whenever the sport ended, I drank till I couldn't stop anymore. And that's how it went. But it also fooled me into thinking, well, I only drink once a week. I don't have a problem here,
And I'm hearing like almost a two-pronged attack coming from the chemical, the alcoholism, the ism, the disease that alcoholics have, that you have, that I have. That's how I believe it. And also, you get drafted as a senior in high school. What is it like to go to college? And everybody knows that you went to Providence, and I know you were around a very good hockey players, but I got to imagine the majority of them did not get drafted before going to college. Did that follow you too, that pressure?
Well, and here's the reverse pressure, Pete. So again, and it's interesting because like I was a 7th round draft choice. If we had 30 kids, 10 were drafted and 7 of them were drafted higher than me. I didn't care about the other 23 people. They meant nothing to me. All I compared myself was to the 7 people that were drafted ahead of me. And that, it's like, there's no, I guess there's no coincidence that a lot of athletes struggle with addiction after their career, because, they're so afraid of failure. I was so afraid of someone being better than me that when that pressure, when that is, when you can let that go and the balloon pops, it pops big time. And so for me, I guess I came from like the standpoint, like I was coming from Philly, which at the time was not a huge hockey hotbed.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Mike Richter, and that was about it. We had Oral Hershiser, who played for actually the Little Flyers, but he turned into a baseball player. And so, I didn't come out of, high school because I was pretty young. I was 17, and I went, when I got to college, there were 20-year-old freshmen. So right from the get-go, I really did take the mindset of, I'm not as good as these kids, but I'm going to certainly work harder. And it's the same way I approached my alcohol. Like, I may not be able to consume as much as you can, but I'm going to do it quicker and faster. And, nothing's going to stop me from getting to where I want to get. And that's just was the cycle that was starting. It was just, I'm going to do this bigger and better than anyone. I'm going to, one beer is never going to be enough. I'm going to have as many as I can have until I reach a high that was insurmountable and I couldn't get to anyway.
What was that like in college? Were there any consequences of this drinking?
Oh God, yeah. And they started right off in my freshman year. When the season was going, I kept it together pretty good, pretty well. But, come the spring, my freshman year, I got a bottle broken over my head. I got 50 stitches in my face and my, in the back of my head.
Just a bar fight?
2 weeks. I'd like to say it was a bar fight, but it was more me just, getting clocked in the back of the head, and actually in this particular case, like, I don't know, like it was a after party of a blind date ball, which for those of you who don't know is like a girl or a guy, in this case a girl, sets their roommate up with a blind date. And so I was a girl's blind date, went to this ball, party or, dance. Afterwards, you go back, we went to this hotel room, and I, like the alcoholic, was looking for the next adventure, wandered off into, 4 random guys' room. One guy had been, taking a good look at me the whole time, eyeballing me. And I'll never forget it, Pete. Like, I was looking back at him. He was about, maybe 15 feet away from me. I remember turning my head, and next thing I know, I'm getting hit over the head with a bottle and, just smashed into my face. Again, did I do anything wrong per se? I don't remember, but I put myself in a situation to fail. You know, here I am. I've got a beautiful date. I could be out with her, hanging out, having a great time, but instead I would always choose the adventure that was never going to be what I thought.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
you're chasing that adrenaline, like you mentioned.
Exactly. I'm searching for this next exciting thing because, the one thing I used to love was tell those stories the next day. Oh, you remember when I did this? You remember when I did that? Until, eventually, Pete, it got to where, like, I was so ashamed and embarrassed of those stories that I just stayed home drinking by myself.
Did you have any, what kind of relationship results did we have in college? Did the alcohol affect your relationships?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as it was, especially in college, Pete, like I was a hockey player. I was supposed to be the big man on campus, and admittedly and embarrassingly, I felt like, a certain, there should be a certain esteem that I should be held in, which was total BS.
It's
But at the
entitlement.
end of the day, exactly. And people should look at me as if, well, with that mentality, you feel like, your girlfriend at the time should hold you at a certain light. So there was a ton of jealousy. God forbid, my girlfriend talk to another guy, and embarrass me. And again, looking back on it, it is so cookie cutter insecurity, and so, cookie cutter, like just weakness and false pride. But,
Well, it's
then you
BS.
get
It's
to the,
BS. I mean,
it,
I did the
it is.
same thing. I mean, if I were to date an attractive woman, I would feel like I'm not good enough
Yep.
to be with this person in this relationship. So really, what I would do is I would take drugs. I would drink a lot of alcohol. I mean, I did this the whole time, and to make myself feel like I was on equal footing, and I tried to keep all the jealousy stuff in check, but it was burning me up inside. Like if I was at a party and a girl started to talk to another guy, and she was an attractive girl that was my girlfriend, I'd be like, wait, what's going on over there? It's like, dude.
Yeah.
And now I'm sober and that doesn't happen. I mean, and if it does happen, I'm like, dude, what are you thinking of? It's like, it's a whole different mentality, but I can totally relate to two things you said. One, the alcohol being a conduit to relationships and relations. And two, the second
Yep.
thing, it's, I heard somebody say this recently. You give other people, when you're an alcoholic and you're insecure, you provide them with superpowers. You basically like
Yep.
whether you're playing a sport, the opposition, or you like a girl, the guy she's talking to, you're going to a job, the person you're working with. It's crazy what we do to ourselves.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's unfortunate, but like at one point, Pete, I'm proud of myself because out of the 5 serious girlfriends I've ever had, or out of the 6 serious girlfriends, and now obviously my wife, but 5 of them I still stay in touch with. And all of them, had to deal with me in active alcoholism. And I like to think that, hopefully I wasn't that bad of a guy throughout this whole thing, but I know I could have been better. And I know I definitely did a lot of damage and owed a lot of people some ninth step amends because, it just, I'm not proud of the way I acted when I was drinking. And, it's really, of all the things that I went through in alcoholism, and Pete, that's like the depression, the anxiety, the suicide attempt in 2011, everything. I think the things I'm most shameful of are the way I treated other women because, I adore my wife and, she has been absolutely my best friend, just such a great better half. And, to think that like I, definitely would have squandered the opportunity to be with her when I was drinking is just, it just makes me sad because that's not the person I know I am, but that's the person that I was during active alcoholism.
And it sounds to me, again, another Me Too deal. Like, you talked about the hockey, the hotel rooms, traveling with your mom and stuff like that. Sounds like you had a real good relationship with your mom, and so did I. So I really like, I think women are the best. I hold them in a real high regard. And so there's some shame for me that I still, I have to let go, that I still work through about, the way that I treated women in relationships because I adore them. And it's something we're constantly working through. I want to get you, enough about me because this is you're very compelling. So I keep jumping in. You're at Providence. Are there consequences as far as the team is concerned, as far as the sport is concerned?
There are, luckily, Pete, there are no consequences other than performance-wise, other than, looking back, I wonder, if one day a week I had worked on my mental health, or one day a week I'd actually done some homework, or one day a week I had trained, or one day a week I had, worked on some relationships that maybe instead of one day a week drinking drinking like a lush, I wonder how things may have turned out. But performance-wise, I hate to say it like this, but I was a beast. I came to college at an underage sixth, recruit out of, the sixth out of six recruits. So there were 5 guys in the freshman class that were recruited prior to me.
And for people who don't know, Providence, that's good hockey.
Yeah, and better now that I'm gone. And I only say that jokingly because my wife and I went up there, and Providence does have a good history. They won the national championship about 5-10 years ago, and but my wife and I laugh about it because we were up there watching a game, and it's got all the NCAA appearances on the wall, and it goes from 80, 83, 87, boom, boom, boom. And there is a 4-year gap, no joke,
No.
from 91 to 95 when I went there. And it's the only 4-year gap there is. And she's like, when did you go there? And I'm like, and I'm just, you know what? You can shut up right there, Pauline. And, I bust her chops because she's a great athlete, probably better than I am. And she played lacrosse at Washington and Lee.
Okay.
But Washington and Lee is a Division III school. So I'm always busting her chops like, yeah, you played D3, girl. Don't even start with me. And she goes, yeah, but I made it to the NCAAs. You didn't. And the big drop, Pete, I got nothing.
And it sounds like a couple of athletes. And, that brings me back to, or brings me to my next question. I was involved with football. You're involved with hockey. We're talking about people who are viewed as gladiators in the locker room, out of the locker room. And there's really no mental health conversation back in the early 90s or even when I was, in the mid 90s in college and late 90s. What was that like for you? I mean, the hockey culture you hear is the guys get drunk, they throw up on their skates and they go play and they kick ass. Was that what happened with you? I mean, and go ahead and answer that first.
You know what, Pete? Like, it was 100% my story. I sit here talking to you without question, and it can sound as egotistical as you make it, but talent was not my problem. I signed a 3-year deal for $1 million, and I, was on my way up to the big club. They had me projected as the 5th wing out of 4. 4 make it. The 5th, needs some time to, simmer.
It's Montreal Canadians.
Montreal, yep. And I was the next guy up, so if there's an injury, a trade, or I just start to develop a little bit more again, I'm still young. I was the next guy up. If talent was the problem, I would just admit, like, you know what, I just didn't make it. But Pete, the problem was mental health. I have, and I've done a podcast on TBIs, which train, traumatic brain injuries. I had my first concussion when I was 5 years old, or in kindergarten, so approximately 5 years old. Fell on a tree, hit my head, went through the whole thing. And by the time my career ended, I had 7 diagnosed traumatic brain injuries, which you could, in my time, they were calling them trauma-induced migraine headaches.
Okay.
So,
get your bell rung.
You get your bell rung, but been to 2-3 neurologists. What they were seeing in something in my, my scans made them think that I wasn't actually having concussions. I was having these trauma-induced migraine headaches. Either way, it was trauma to the brain. And I fully believe that had a huge, huge effect on my career, but also on my alcoholism. We talk about the genetic portion of it, but there's also a brain chemistry part, where I'm just wired different. And, then you go on to the mentality, and it just as well, Pete, like, we are warriors. You look at the hockey guys during the playoffs with the cuts and and the beards, like, there's no way we're sitting out. I mean, it took me a day and a half to go to the hospital because I had, 2 fractures in my jaw and wouldn't go to a doctor. Thought I could sleep it off. Things like that you just don't talk about, you don't do. But again, Pete, like, I can't remember a time where I didn't come to the rink scared to death because I was terrified I was going to get hurt again. Your listeners will probably miss this, but do you remember Dr. Emperor?
No, Dr. Emperor? No.
Okay, well, I only mention because he was my orthopedic doctor.
Okay.
And he has a file the size of the big book on me. It's just, from 2 shattered collarbones to a broken scapula, broken wrist, broken jaw twice, the concussions. It's just, but you keep going because, again, you feel like that's what you're supposed to do. When in reality, Pete, I just didn't want to get hurt anymore.
Yeah.
So as any true, knucklehead, if you don't want to get hurt, what do? You play harder so that you get hurt more because you don't want anyone to know you're afraid.
And the fear, you're if you're at all like me, and you are because you're an alcoholic, I would guess that the fear, there's nowhere else to go with that but more alcohol.
The all-new Chevy Colorado is made for more. Stacked with the latest in-vehicle technologies like a class-leading 11-inch diagonal center touchscreen and an extra-large wireless charging pad. Plus, it features wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to make staying connected easy wherever your adventure takes you. Chevy Colorado, made for more. Learn more at Chevrolet.com/truck/Colorado. Claims based on latest competitive data.
Exactly. And you find yourself running into walls just to let people know you're not scared when in reality you're terrified. And the only time you're not scared is when you're drinking, because then you don't have to worry what other people think anymore.
So you're at Providence. This thing is obviously really starting to take control. You mentioned when you said being 5th in the rotation, or 5th or 6th, I forget, with the big club. Was that during college or that's after? That's right after.
So yeah, that's after. So the way it went down, and I laughed because I was having this conversation with someone today just about just about like the maturity level and what we tell our kids now, as a coach and as an athletic director. I had signed in March of '91, and I'll never forget my agent guy, Steve Mountain. You may know him from the area.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. So Steve was my agent, and he calls. He says, "Brady, I'm in college." He says, "Brady, you're in. We got exactly what we wanted. 3 years, this and that." He said, "All you have to do is get yourself an airline ticket head up to Montreal, and you'll be in, the minor league lineup the next night, because they were actually doing like a showcase at the Forum. So the minor league team would be there, so all their fans could see the prospects.
Yeah.
And I called my mom, no joke, 21 years old. Here's the tough hockey player, in tears, because Pete, I have no idea how to get a plane ticket. I have no idea, and I think this is like some foreign, like, who gets plane tickets? Because I've been coddled all my life.
Yeah.
And, I just don't know how to be a grown-up. I have no idea how to be a grown-up. So I get to Montreal, and, now I'm here, and, I'm supposed to be enjoying my spring of my senior year in college, going to keg parties, raging. Meanwhile, my first game in Montreal, I get my face beat in by, the other team's enforcer. And
who was the enforcer? Will we know him?
So the guy's name is Doug Friedman. And you know what? Like, Dougie was just doing his job. We played BU, and he was sticking me all game. He played at Boston University.
Yeah.
And,
so you knew this guy.
All games. I did. I knew him. And I'll never forget, because, like, I remember, like, I'm in college. He was a year ahead of me, so he's already turned pro. And one of the guys on my team looks at his stats. It's like, oh, Friedman doesn't even have that many penalty minutes. Like, he's not as tough as we thought he was. I know that played into my mind when I dropped the gloves with him. Well, turns out the guy must have been injured or something, because, he had plenty of penalty minutes. And so you'll love this one, because, for those of you from the Philadelphia area, they know Donald Brashear, right?
Sure.
So Donald is on my team in Fredericton, and he got kicked out of the game earlier. I just get kicked out of the game. He looks a lot better than I do, because he won his fight. I did not win mine. And he looks over at me and he says, Brady, that is not your job here. And I look at him, Pete, and I'm like, thanks for telling me now. But that was it. Like, I'm a young college kid. I just had taken the mask off for the first time, because, in college we wear a full mask, and I never fought. But, like, I didn't want anyone to know I was afraid, so I fought, which, again, like, if you were looking at me now, picture a Cabbage Patch doll with his hands wide open, and that's how I went into my first fight. I mean, it must have looked like a balloon when he punched me in the face, because I wasn't protecting myself, because I didn't know how, And then, Donald right after that says, hey, Brady, you don't have to do that. Like, you're not here to fight. You're here to, to score or to kill penalties or whatever, but I'm here to fight. But like that, like, God forbid, anyone think that I was weak or scared. And in hockey, you either have to, eat crow, which I wasn't doing, or fight, which I didn't know how to do. So I was kind of between a rock and a hard place. And Pete, right after that first game, I suffered through 17 more. And I had good games. I was just so anxious, so depressed.
Were you drinking when you were going through this minor league experience?
And here's the thing, I wasn't, Pete. Like, my drinking, and again, this is like, I almost feel like I have to fast forward to how it all like ended with me. Like, I never drank when I was anxious or depressed, because I knew it wouldn't make me feel better. And I was too anxious and depressed to drink. But what I would do is I would drink so I never got anxious and depressed,
Mm-hmm.
But when the sports was still in play, and again, my alcoholism really took shape probably mid-20s, that's when I was off to the races. Because once you take the hockey out, now there's no reason for me to stay sober.
So 18 you play 18 games. And
I play 18 games.
And then you decide, I can't go through this anymore, and you quit.
So, and again, foreshadowing. So I play the regular season out. You know, they had 6 regular season games because I met them towards the end of the season because I had been in college.
Gotcha.
So I left college early, played 12 playoff games because they just wouldn't lose, Pete. Like, we went to the Calder Cup finals.
Yeah.
We ended up, like, I mean, here I am, like, you know, they keep putting me in the lineup, and I want to be like, please, don't put me in the lineup. I'm terrified out here, you know? But I was playing well, you know? And you know, I had, like, a 3-point game. I was the second star, and I never forget, like, you know, I'm leaving the game, and my mom's like, you know, hey, great game. I'm like, Mom, I am miserable. And if you haven't caught on, I am a total mama's boy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, my mom moved up to Fredericton, New Brunswick, you know, while I was there because, you know, I was just so miserable. And so, you know, the season ends, spend the summer, go back to training camp. We played 2 rookie games against the Ottawa Senators. And these are like, I've heard Gettysburg was a pretty significant battle in the Civil War. These make Gettysburg look mild. I mean, there are 15 fights. I get cut over the eye. They hot glue it shut. Like, I mean, they push you right back out there. I mean, this is like, you know, all the rookies trying to prove that they're tough enough to get to the next level. And my dad is up at St. Lawrence because that's where the exhibition game was. I leave. He sees me after the game, and he says, how you doing, Braids? I go, Dad, I have to have my head effing examined to even want to do this. And, you know, again, hang in there. Well, that was the end. We had the next day off. And as you know, as I've said, my drinking, you know, my drinking trend was to drink when I had the next day off. And I went out on St. Catherine Street in Montreal and and you know what? It involved a girl, I remember too. I was talking to a girl and ended up getting drunk enough that she probably realized I don't want to be with this drunk fool. Ended up walking back to the hotel by myself and woke up the next morning in Providence, Rhode Island, where my parents were, because I'd flown home, because that's the only way, Pete, I could get the courage to leave. And, and, you know, and that was kind of another, looking back, Pete, another example of like, wow, like there was another sign of my alcoholism that I just missed. And please, just to qualify, like, you know, I became a daily drinker. I was always a blackout drinker. You know, I drank on August 29th, 2011. I woke up that morning anxious, depressed, but no thought of ending my life, just miserable. And by August 30th, 2011, I woke up in a hospital having just tried to kill myself.
So we're gonna. I don't want to keep you here all day, but I just want to kind of want to move through. So you get done.
Yep.
You get done hockey. You work in the travel industry. Your drinking is picking up. It's ramping up. And now we get to August of 2011. And what happens?
August of 2011, you know, I tried to quit, Pete, several times. In 2008, I tried to quit because I was too sick to drink. In 2010, I was mentally sick and
Penn Hospital.
Tried to quit. But what's that?
At Penn Hospital, you ended up.
No.
You said at Penn.
No, I just said in 2010.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So anyway, you know, fast forward, like I said, went through this anxiety, this depression, stopped drinking, wasn't getting better. And then, you know, August 29th, coming home from work, I thought it would be a great idea to grab an 18-pack of Bud Light. And as you know, like, alcohol changes the mind. And, you know, I had been trending, you know, really bad for 3 months without alcohol. But as you know, without any support system, without any, you know, program, you're just a dry drunk. And I did not know that. And
so you tried to stop for a while, and then you said, "Hey, let me just get an 18-pack and see how this works out."
Correct.
Yeah.
Because
I can
relate.
relate.
I didn't think alcohol. You know what I mean? I just didn't know like I didn't know that I had alcoholism. I knew I drank too much. An alcoholic looked like a brown paper bag guy who lived in a gutter, that had DUIs, that had jail time, that had this, and those were all my yets, as you know.
Yeah, I haven't done this yet. This hasn't happened yet. Yeah. So
Yep.
you drink that day, or you get that 18 pack, and then how do you end up almost taking your life?
So got home from school, which was my pattern in the past. Get home 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You drink to get drunk, and then you pass out and you go back the next day. Well, I just never forget it. 6 o'clock.
And you're working at a school.
I'm working at a school.
Okay.
Yep. Had a dream job. Again, dream job, like PE teacher out in San Diego, California.
No kidding.
PE teacher, athletic director, loving it. But the depression, the anxiety are just, I was having a bad batch, like Bill Wilson,
Yeah.
And I get home, and after about 12, 14 beers, like I'll never forget. I remember thinking of Oscar De La Hoya. And Oscar De La Hoya, I believe, either suffers from alcoholism.
Yeah, he does.
He definitely suffers. Yep, definitely suffers from depression and anxiety. And I remember him saying in an interview, like, I'm just not, not being tough enough to take his own life. And I thought, well, I'm tough enough. And what a just moronic thought, by the way, for anybody out there on that, on that plane. But the reality is, Pete, like, I had some sleeping pills or like Valium type pills. And it was amateur night. I wasn't trying to kill myself. It was my cry for help. And I think I probably had 10 pills. I tried to, swallow those, or I swallowed those, and then, had like a steak knife and tried to cut my wrists. And the bottom line was, like, it was amateur night. And I don't remember anything else other than laying down in the tub, praying that I wasn't going to wake up, because I was so miserable. But then the next morning, waking up in a hospital with a nurse, watching over me, because my parents back east had paid for a nurse to take care of me because they didn't want me to wake up by myself.
And then what happens? I mean, how do we get sober? How do we?
Yeah.
Obviously,
so then,
I'm guessing this is the jumping off point.
This is my rock bottom. I do my 72 hours, and I'm assuming we're pretty touched on time here. But
no, we're good. We're good. I mean, you got time. We got like another 20, 25
okay.
minutes. Yeah, so don't rush.
Okay.
But I don't want to keep you all day long either. You got a wife and a family.
I love talking about this stuff, man, because as you know, it helps us get better. But I do my mandatory 72 hold, because I've just taken the Baker Act, which again, Pete, we could do a whole podcast on that. I mean, I ended up on my last day there, I ended up leaving. There's a big metal door, and, I'd made friends with a couple of these people.
So you basically end up in after you try to take your own life in like a mental hospital.
In the loony bin, I mean, I'm there. I am with, I'm with people that are, this is a state-run public, mental facility. And, it is not a great place. I've got one guy that, asked me if I wanted to break free with him. And on the last day, and you're talking like no shoelaces, people like standing on the wall, like kind of, doing the head nod thing because they're so out of it. And on the last day, after my 72 hours, the door opens, I go to leave, and somebody tries to make a break for it. and I kick him in the chest to keep him from leaving because the nurse was so small. And the door closes behind me. And Pete, I wish I could say it got better then, but that's when it started. It like, I wish I could say that like everything just became roses then, but I'm still, this is August of 2011, I'm still a good 5 months before my first AA meeting.
But you stay sober for that 5 months.
I do. I'm and as you know, And for those of you, who are alcoholics, know I was dry.
Yeah, bro, I go
was
5 days without a meeting, and I get I get rammy. For sure. Now, how do you get to that first meeting?
So, and this is where God came in for me. So I'd been to see a spiritual guru. I'd been to McLean Mental Hospital. They wanted to give me the ECT, you know what I mean? The paddles to reset your brain or whatever.
You're trying everything else but AA or recovery to stop drinking.
Exactly. Because Pete, in my mind, Alcoholics Anonymous is for people that need to stop drinking. And I don't need to stop drinking. I've stopped. And I don't want to stop drink anymore. But emotionally, I am broken. I am now, I would never try to commit suicide again because I know the damage it's done. But for 4 months, I'm putting my head on a pillow, praying that I don't wake up in the morning. Just praying. And one morning, I had been up all night, which had been my pattern. And I'm staying with my parents in Rhode Island. My brother, who incidentally is 2 weeks out of Cranston Federal Penitentiary which is prison for those of you who do not know, is staying in the same house as I am. And I could have walked straight down the hall, knocked on my parents' door and said, Mom, Dad, I can't do it, help. But that hadn't been working. So I knocked on my brother's door. And again, as you can paint the picture, this, he's had his struggles. But I didn't have anywhere else to turn. Nothing was working. And I knock on his door and I call him Griggs and I said, Griggs, I just can't do this anymore, man. I'm done. And he said, that's it. We're going to an AA meeting. Huh. And I said, buddy, I don't even drink anymore. Why would I go? He said, maybe there's a little something more going on there than stopping drinking. And Pete, that was it. That, I went to a meeting that morning. It was a 6:30 meeting. He promised me I wouldn't have to share. It was a daily reflections meeting where everybody shares. So I had to share. And I heard this acronym the other day, and it's the only thing I can explain of why I've kept coming back, and it's hope. Hearing other people's experiences. That's what's kept me coming back. The second I got in those rooms, Pete, I had no idea what alcoholism was. I had no idea how being an alcoholic could save my life. But I had hope. There was something in those rooms that, whatever these people were saying, that, as you know, in those first days, of meetings, in mine is I was surprised they were talking about God so much. That's how little I knew about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's a magical deal. That there's just similar to you. There's a woman. There's a group I go to here in Texas, and there's a woman who hadn't drank for 2 years, and her sister has a relationship with AA, or her sister was sober for a little bit, and she told her sister, "Hey, I'm really struggling. I'm jammed," and her sister said, "Hey, you should go to AA." And this woman now has been coming to meetings, and she's loving it because there is that hope in the room. And I hope people who stop drinking can also stop the mental fight, right? And just walk into a meeting. For me, that's what worked, at least. That's my experience to live. Because Brady, man, talking to you seem like a happy dude. And I talked to somebody close to you, and they talked about just your message and the light that comes off you. And it's great to hear you talk about the depression the 5 months after, because I know that this light coming off you is a result of your work in recovery.
And Pete, and I say this, I wish almost we were on a Zoom or I was on your show or whatever, because I just, so you could see the sincerity in my eyes. Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. It has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, and yet every every day's not a winner.
Yeah.
Like I still suffer from depression. I still suffer from anxiety. I still get jammed up all the time. But you know what? Like, I don't live in that state of mind. Like, it comes, it goes. I have hundreds of resources of how to get out of that. Like, I call another person. I do a podcast with you. Like, I talk to, like my wife. Like, I do a gratitude list. Like, you name it. Like, there are so many ways, whereas, like, I felt like I was broken and there was no way to fix me. And, the only thing I feel bad about with AA is, like, people that aren't, that don't drink too much, don't qualify, and they don't get what we get, because Alcoholics Anonymous, for me, my Alcoholics Anonymous would work for every individual on the face of the earth, because it's a program of just doing the right thing for people, being in service, and just like, living life. And I just, like I said, it's like, it sounds cultish, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's just really, really, it's been the manual that I was missing. I knew how to shoot a slap shot. I knew how to do a breakout, I knew how to run the trap, but I didn't know how to live life. Like, I didn't know how to make an airline ticket,
Yeah.
And
it's a blueprint.
AA
It's a blueprint for life. It really is.
It really is.
And to speak to what you're saying, and I want to ask you a couple more questions. The 12 steps are used in all kinds of different ways to help people that are struggling with all kinds of different addictions. And it's not like I'm laying claim to it, or because I don't represent AA. I'm just a guy who like you, it saved my life. But they started with AA. I mean, that's where you get the 12 steps. Now, I want to backtrack. Was there any drugs involved? Like, was there any, you mentioned that as a kid you were turned off and you kind of had the sports mentality, no drugs. Nancy Reagan scared the shit out of me too, by the way. But and really, it didn't. It worked until you start to take drugs, and then you think you're a terrible person. So what did any drug scene for you?
Yeah, not much. I mean, I lived out in California, so I did smoke some marijuana.
Uh-huh.
Like, I can count, like, I don't even think I ever bought marijuana. I had been given marijuana before, like, yes, like, did ecstasy once or twice, but again, Pete, like, so drunk that I don't even know that, ecstasy was even capable of working with all the alcohol I had been drinking.
Yeah.
So, but never cocaine, no heroin, none of that stuff, just only because, like, that was the big boys for me. And again, like, that's just my personal story. Like, I knew, Pete, like, if I had been doing cocaine, we're probably not having this conversation, because I don't know that I could have survived a cocaine addiction, not the way I'm wired. It just, I know I would have liked it too much. And again, terrified of, like, dying. Like, I don't want to die, Pete. Like, I really don't want to die. And again, my role model was my brother, who didn't seem to be doing too well with cocaine, and Lenny Bias, who, again, like, he died, like, to me, like, he took it one night and died the next.
Yeah.
So that's, like, that's the image I have of drugs, and like, the fear of, like, and marijuana made me paranoid. Like, if I ever smoked marijuana, like, I had to be in, like, a really controlled setting, watching Ren and Stimpy, eating Doritos, like, the whole, it had to be just this perfect environment.
You mentioned, us not having this conversation, and there are other ways too. Talking to you now, I get this jolt. It's like, we're both I get reminded we're both in the bonus round of life. Most people don't get a seat in the rooms of recovery just because they don't. Most people just don't get here, and luckily the ball bounced, or the puck bounced our way. And now here I am talking to you. How did your life change when, and this is all, by the way, by the grace of God, I'm talking to you. It's not like I had any game plan, like, literally, no. I fell ass backwards into a great way of life. How did your life start to change when you embraced recovery and you had a taste of that hope?
It's interesting because, like, I always felt like the Bronx Tale. You remember Chaz Palminteri or whatever his name is in Bronx Tale? He says, the biggest disappointment in life is,
wasted talent.
And I felt like that guy. Like, I felt like, I have all the potential in the world. Like, I feel like I could be the president of the United States if I wasn't so depressed, if I wasn't so anxious, again, all symptoms of my alcoholism. But like, I'm not built that way. Like, I can't overcome it. Like, there's too much fear, as we know through our 4-step. There's so much fear. Now, like, the biggest benefit of Alcoholics Anonymous has been, like, I get scared, I'm fearful, but like, it doesn't last, and I know there's nothing I can't complete. Like, I know that if I want to be, a government official, I can be a government official. Like, if I want to be an athletic director at Archbishop Carroll, I can be the athletic director at Archbishop Carroll. And that was a big turning point for me, Pete, because like, that was like the first big boy job I had in recovery. And, other than that, like, I thought I was destined to, like, like, hey, lots of people have great careers as bellmen, but like, that's all I could think of that I could actually do. It's like carrying people's luggage and talking to them, like nothing that would ever stress me out. And now, like, I have a way to deal with life on life's terms. And so that's like, was the first, inklings of like, wow, I have, I'm not scared of trying things anymore.
Yeah, I know. And you try and you kind of go through, it's all about repetition, building up reps and walking. I walk through so many doors in the wrong direction through alcohol and drugs. And you walk through those doors and you can just keep walking, right? It's like your lows get lower. On the other side of that, in recovery, you keep walking through doors and it's like you walk through that fear and, oh man, this feels good. I'm on the other side of all that fear, and win, lose, or draw, I did it. So I feel this gust of esteem. And I didn't have that before because I would just get drunk. Now, what do you talk to, kids. I know you do a lot of talking today about recovery. I love your message, dude, of just, you're about breaking the stigma of mental health, alcoholism. What do you tell the young people, or what do you just tell crowds about sobriety, the folks you talk to?
Well, and it's interesting, Pete, because it's like, it's a combined message, like sobriety to me starts, again, it encompasses mental health. Like, the big book talks about, there's the depressive type that like most of us, that people don't understand or whatever it may be. So, my sobriety, it encompasses like the mental health aspect of like, depression is such an amazing foe because depression tells you it's not okay to not be okay. It's just, and so for me, like my sobriety encompasses that mental health, topic. So, what I tell these kids is like, everything I've learned in AA, but towards the mental health aspect, like, if you're, and I guess my biggest message is like, please ask for help. Please come out there. Like, you would be shocked that like how many people will say me too, as you and I have said on this podcast, like me too. And that's where like the connection comes. Sobriety is about connection. Like, I needed to know that like people like you that I respect and people like, some pro athletes that like I know that are in recovery. Like, I needed to know that I'm not the only one that is terrified that you'll know that, hey, I'm pretty sensitive, Pete. Like, I get my feelings hurt a lot. Yeah. For a guy that like led his team in penalty minutes all 4 years at Providence and wasn't, can't say I wasn't afraid, but
nobody saw you as a soft guy.
Exactly. Like, you can hurt my feelings by just looking at me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And now I'm not afraid to admit that. That's like, so, my message to these kids, and it's been such a gift, man. Like, I wish you could come to one of my classes. Like, these kids, like, I may have mentioned this already, but like, when I talk about I'm teaching health right now with a nurse, and, we talk about alcohol and addiction and that kind of stuff. And you could hear a pin drop when I am telling them my story, because like, I'm not like beating around the bush with them. I know they're going to drink at some point. Like I know it. And I'm not telling them not to drink, Pete. I'm just telling them that, listen, like, here's what happened to me. This is my experience with drinking. Here are some of the signs. Like, I've never had a drink where I didn't drink to get drunk.
Yeah.
Ever. So, if you're, in ninth grade or whatever it may be, when you start drinking and you get blackout drunk your first drink, you may want to take a hard look at the way your alcohol career is going to turn out.
Yeah, I woke up with the markers all over me. It's one of those deals. Yeah. And
I was a human whiteboard.
Yeah, totally. And one thing you said, and it's to each his own, right? I mean, if you want to keep your recovery, it's called Alcoholics Anonymous, of course, or even if you're sober and that's not the way you got it done. But I really appreciate people, breaking the stigma and sharing the message. There's so many. I kind of dropped in on recovery for so long. I read books about it. I couldn't stop drinking, and I was watching this Dennis Eckersley Sports Century Classic. He's the old ESPN show, and Eckersley is sober, and he talked about when he was so drunk one Christmas that his daughter videotaped him being completely wasted, and he watched it. And this is like 1984. I think he was playing for the Cubs at the time, and he got sober from that point forward. And the guy was like somebody I wanted to be like. I remember watching this and crying and being like, I can't get there. But thinking to myself, like, I want to have that. And now I'm not Dennis Eckersley, but I'm not drunk. And it's
right.
It's that helped me.
And I always say, like, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous backwards. Like, I'd already stopped drinking, and then I needed to realize, like, that alcohol had been my solution, not my problem. Like, all my problems were these fears and these anxieties and these, feeling less than. And the solution had been my alcohol, but it took me, a couple of years to figure that out. And, once I finally, like, figured out what was going on in these rooms, and that it wasn't just about stopping drinking, like, then I could connect the dots and say, like, hey, Brady, you did spend the better part of 2 years drinking every single day, but, Pete, like, I never drank at work. So that didn't make me an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. Again, yet. Like, it's incredible, like, how many times you hear parts of or all of your story. And then, like, like, I get a little timid about, like, sharing my story with these kids, because I don't want to ever romanticize, and I really do stay away from the whole suicide thing, because I don't want to even, like, I'm not trained to talk about that with these kids.
Me neither. Yeah.
But I you know what I mean? But, like, I do want to say, like, hey, I had suicidal thoughts, and I want to say, like, hey, like, you're going to find out that, like, probably if you dig deep enough and hear my messages on the internet, that I had a suicide attempt. But, like, at the end of the day, like, I do get timid about, like, there is still a stigma. And I don't want, like, I'm very careful with kids that, like, I want them to know they're in a safe place. And I want their parents to know they're in a safe place. And, there's still that stigma in my mind that, like, if they think, I'm an alcoholic, they'll equate me to something else. And I can tell you this, to this day, Pete, like, and I've been teaching now sober for, 5 years now sober, because I was doing the event stuff and everything else. I haven't had alcoholism come back to bite me once.
Yeah.
No one has
being honest and being open.
Exactly. And if they do, shame on them. It's like, hey, like, it's probably, I've usually figured out, like, if somebody has a problem with my alcoholism, there may be a little bit more that they're dealing with under the rug that, I'll let them figure out. But, it's been a great message. It's been a way for me actually to relate to these kids because, especially in this pandemic, man, the mental health crisis is real and these kids are suffering, and whatever hope or levity I can give them, then I know, the 20 years, the suicide attempt, the ruined, not ruined, but the career that didn't go the way I went, the broken bottle over my head. It was all worth it, man.
Yeah.
It was all worth it. If I can help one of these kids just to ask me for help when they need it, then I've done my job.
Or to ask somebody else because
Exactly.
they talk to you. So we're going to wrap up, but anything else? I mean, dude, this has been unbelievable, and I could hold you hostage for half a day. But anything else you want to tell people about recovery, and then just anything else? And then lastly, I'll ask people where they can find you and what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I guess really, Pete, I just want to thank you. I mean, there is nothing, and whenever I chair or speak at a meeting, I usually start it by just saying, there's nothing that gives me more pride and more excitement than sharing at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or sharing my story, with someone, because it just makes me feel good. It's a rush. It's like, I love it because I know where I was and I know where I've been and where I'm going. And at the end of the day, it all, the dots have connected. So thank you so much for letting me be on your show.
Yeah, dude, thank you. I mean, really, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Any platforms you have that you want to, I mean, obviously we talked about the fact that I listened to a podcast about you before. Did you have a foundation or anything, or there was something before?
Yeah, no, I kind of went when I got, it's funny I have nothing really,
Okay.
Obviously I have a Facebook page, profile. If anyone ever wanted to reach out, Brady Kramer, it's my Facebook page, just to talk recovery, anything.
Yeah.
I'm always open, and obviously would love to speak whenever I can. I'm always available to talk the message to someone else.
All right. Well, send me text me a beautiful headshot of yours, and then and maybe a hockey picture too, so we can promote this. And I want people to hear your message, man.
Hey, Pete, seriously, man. And if you get to the area again, or
oh, dude, I'm gonna
whatever,
hit you up. Yeah, I'll be in touch.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I appreciate your
Awesome.
time, dude.
You bet. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, Brady.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.